So SignalR solves the problem of state management where we have separate front ends and back ends. The scenario is we have several front end clients right now using our website, and some of them have loaded a specific inventory line, and the quantity of that line is 100. Now another person, this is the fifth client in this example over here on the right hand side, he decides to reduce the quantity by 10, and now we make a change in the database to put the quantity to 90. What happens normally now is the front end clients are unaware of this. On their screens, their HTML front end is showing a quantity of 100, and they can submit this and use it for requests. And this is how we get introduced into errors and stuff we don't want to happen. How this is solved with SignalR is we create a WebSocket or an HTTP long pole or server-side events. SignalR abstracts this away and creates a real-time connection between the back end and the front end. So that what happens then, if you see, once we receive the request to reduce the inventory by 10, as soon as we get a successful response from the database, we then use SignalR to send a message to all the front end websites. And in the browser, we now know that the quantity should be 90, and we can change that then in real time from 100 to 90. This is what Angular and React or any front-end framework already does, is data binded. So you'd have your service. So yeah, let's go into the code then. Let me open up some code and let me show you the idea that I'm working on right now. So let's close this and so this is the SignalR service in our front-end Angular app. It's very, very simple. We're using the SignalR package, and we connect to a hub. So in your environment, you'll have whatever you set up in your backend, and I'll show you this in a second. You connect to that, and then by default, all our backend endpoints are protected. You need to give a valid JSON web token, and that's handled by our backend. This is .NET WebAPI, so this is standard. However you normally authenticate, just put that JSON web token in there. In this case, we save it to the local storage of the browser, and then this becomes the main event loop here. So whenever we get a receive message, this is the channel that we set up. So whenever we get a receive message channel, we want that to happen, and then just to start connection. Now, we don't really need this. The front end will never really send a message to the back end. It's possible this is a socket, it's bi-directional communication, although the problem that we're trying to solve is where we want the back end to have a way to send real-time updates to the front end. So we're never going to send a message, we only want to receive. So I hope this makes sense. And then it's a service, so an Angular service, you can now inject it into any component that you want to use it in. Let's look at the C# code. This is our back end now. So I could probably keep both of these up here at once. So in your backend API, there's going to be a SignalR package as well. So you'll do this with NuGet. Let me just find it. It's right here. So ASP.NET Core, SignalR. You'll want to install that. And then in your startup class, let me move the camera just so you can see better. You're going to do your services, add SignalR, and then set up your endpoint, your My Hub. So you know how I said there was an environment.signalr for our hub URL over in Angular? That's this endpoint here. And we're allowing anonymous authentication, which means all that's going to happen is it'll be handled by our normal authentication middleware. And in this case, we're just going to look at your JSON web token and if it's valid or not. It's very, very simple. So in your startup, you make a My Hub, a class that implements the SignalR Hub, and you don't have to do anything. You can even just use the hub if you wanted, but this is how we'd override it and do custom stuff. And then I made a test method, a test controller where I can just test this out. It's very, very easy. So you can see kind of the left side and the right side. On the left we have the backend. This is the SignalR send message, and then on the right hand side this is how it is received. So I have this opened already in my browser. So let me clear this out. So if I use the Backend API, I can cause an event now to happen in this web browser. In any web browser, it could be on my phone. I could have 1,000 different computers all connected to this, and it's essentially a publisher-subscriber model. Watch what happens when I click send. See? We got our message right now on the front end. Let me clear that. And let me push send again. You'll see what happens. Boom, message received, and it's in an instant right there. So this is how we can now implement different channels. And what I mean by that, when we're on the inventory page, we're not going to care about updates to the orders. We're not going to care about updates to the allocations. We're not going to care about updates to the customers or vendors. So if we're on the inventory page, we only care if someone updates the inventory. Likewise, if we're on the unit of measures page, we only care if someone's going to update that. So you can then see where we're going with this. So when we take a look at our SignalR service, this here becomes the channel. So there's an inventory. We're going to want an orders. We're going to maybe want customer, vendor. Actually, no, let's not worry about that. Let's set up the important stuff right now. The stuff we're dealing with that causes business issues. Allocations, order items, and is it order packages? I think it's called order packages. And then what's really going to happen is we're going to receive the full model. So let me show you kind of what I mean about that. Let me open up my models and go to orders. Actually, no, there's only an inventory one ready right now. So the idea is we're going to receive not two parameters, but it will be inventory, inventory, and then let's add that in. So you can see how that makes sense then. So on the back end, we'll send the inventory object, and on the front end, we get the object, and we have access now to all the parameters that you see here, and then we can re-render the DOM. We need to do this so slightly different, so we need to turn these into observables. So we'll have public observables that the services will then subscribe to, if that makes sense. So in my inventory component, I would subscribe to the inventory observable. And then when that happens, I would pre-render inventory list. So does this make sense then? So for the message that we're going to send, it'll be the DTO containing the entire object. And that's how we can then apply it in. So the entity message that we'll be receiving in the global queue, based on the type, we'll then know what it is. And the whole reason that we're doing this is so that we can use the typing. So object.c, we have access to all the properties of it, and that's what makes it so powerful. So then the example is in our components, we can now subscribe to this, and we have access to those same properties, and we can do whatever we want in the component. So we set up observables for each of our modules, for the master inventory, for the unit of measures, for the inventory, and the whole reason is we only want that data to be here. So if we're on the inventory screen, we only want inventory data to be coming in here, so that we use this to update what's being rendered. So right here, this dot inventory list, we will be changing that based on the ID. So we'll look in the ID, find wherever that is, and change it. And the implementation is extremely easy. So you see here on the left, we have another channel, you could call it. That first parameter is just whatever, it's a SignalR method. But we have the send over here on the right, send the test, and that's what's being received over here. And then when we get more complex, we can construct any object we want and send it through.